Mirage Studios era. Two artists printed a black and white comic in May 1984 and accidentally invented a franchise that would dominate children's entertainment for 4 decades. Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird self-published the first issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from their own resources, no corporate backing, no marketing budget, no reason to believe anyone beyond their immediate circle would ever see it. The premise they settled on was deliberately absurd. 4 turtles, trained by a rat named Splinter, fighting a ninja army called the Foot Clan under a leader called Shredder. It should not have worked. It should have been a single-issue curiosity sold at comic conventions and forgotten. Instead, Mirage Studios published the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic book series between 1984 and 2014, and every subsequent version of these characters traces its DNA directly back to this single black and white issue. The original run established the pieces that still define the property: Splinter as mentor, the Foot Clan as the organized enemy, Shredder as the franchise's defining villain. Nobody in 1984 had any way of knowing those specific choices would still be in effect 30 years later. The boring explanation writes itself. 2 talented creators made something audiences connected with, distribution found its way to readers, and a successful property followed the predictable arc of comic to franchise expansion. But the facts don't sit quietly inside that explanation. The publishing run doesn't support a simple success story. Mirage Studios kept publishing the series between 1984 and 2014. Instead, Mirage Studios remained the publisher throughout the franchise's expansion into cartoons and films until 2009. The original Mirage comic series ran from 1984 until 1995 before concluding its initial major run. The comic established the core elements: Splinter's training of the Turtles, the Foot Clan's structure, Shredder's role as leader. And those pieces remained the franchise's foundation through every subsequent adaptation, regardless of whether the people making those adaptations understood the source material. 1987, animated series era. The Mirage Studios era was defined by creator ownership, while the 1987 era marked a shift in creative and production dynamics. The animated series premiered as a 5-part miniseries in 1987 and became a syndicated Saturday morning series in 1988, running for nearly a decade. The shift in approach was immediate and deliberate. The tone differed sharply from the original comics, specifically engineered to be much more accessible and therefore marketable to general audiences. The Turtles received color-coordinated masks and distinct personalities baked into their visual design, making them instantly distinguishable to viewers who had never read a comic and never would. The show also introduced an iconic theme song that became inseparable from the franchise's identity, and the combination of that music, the visual clarity, and the cheeky humor locked the series into cultural memory with a permanency the original comic never achieved. The surreal plots, the unmistakable 1980s visual style, the rapid-fire jokes, none of it was accidental. This was the version designed for maximum audience reach, and it achieved exactly that. The series ran almost a decade, reaching audiences far beyond the comic's initial readership, and it became the reference point for every TMNT adaptation that followed. By the time the 2003 series launched, the 1987 cartoon version had become the main reference point for how fans recognized the Turtles. The show's 9-year run is the more visible spine of the franchise in popular memory, and the Mirage Studios comics' 30-year publishing record becomes the less-known parallel track. Defenders of the original comic argue that the 1987 version flattened the characters into marketable archetypes and traded the source material's edge for Saturday morning accessibility. That argument holds. The tone shift is real. The simplification of the Turtles into color-coded personalities is real. But it doesn't explain why this version specifically became the franchise's anchor. The 2003 series was inspired by the comic's tone, and the 2012 series offered a new take on the Turtles. Neither displaced the 1987 version in the public imagination. The question that the evidence leaves open is whether the 1987 series' staying power came from its creative choices or from the sheer scale of its initial reach, whether it became the reference point because it was the better adaptation, or simply because more people encountered it at the age where franchise loyalties calcify. Subscribe and tell us in the comments which franchise phase you think defined the Turtles for you. let's get back into it. 1990s live-action film era. Sure, the cartoon polarized Saturday mornings, but the live-action trilogy came crashing into theaters and changed absolutely everything. On March 30th, 1990, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles dropped, and suddenly it was not just a kids' show or a niche comic, it was a blockbuster. A film directed by Steve Barron, written by Todd W. Langen and Bobby Herbeck, and backed by the kind of practical effects that nobody had seen for costumed heroes before. The suits created by Jim Henson's Creature Shop featured advanced animatronics enabling live-action performances not seen in earlier adaptations. The 1990 film, directed by Steve Barron, brought the Turtles to live-action cinema and featured martial arts action influenced by their comic origins. The box office didn't blink. The movie exploded well past expectations, expanding the TMNT audience far beyond comic fans. The success didn't stop at a single film. Two more followed in rapid succession, one in 1991 and another in 1993, forming a trilogy of live-action films that defined the Turtles for a generation. That escalation wasn't just a matter of ticket sales. The trilogy coincided with massive merchandising including action figures, video games, and more, making the Turtles a universally recognized pop culture phenomenon. The critics pointed out inconsistencies, plot holes, tone shifts between films, but none of it mattered. This era wasn't trying to refine lore, it was steamrolling it. The 1990s films became a defining pop culture moment for the TMNT franchise. If you're wondering why the tone jumps so wildly and why the Turtles' personalities and rules seem to reboot every time, it's not a bug of the franchise, it is the mechanism. The live-action trilogy helped transform the franchise, ushering in new interpretations and mainstream appeal. From then on, TMNT became a broad multimedia franchise. 2003 animated series era. So while the movies detonated the canon and spawned variants everywhere, the 2003 animated series reintroduced the Turtles with a tone closer to their original comic roots. Developed by Lloyd Goldfine and based on the creation of Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, this series premiered February 8, 2003 and ran straight through February 28, 2009. 7 seasons, 155 episodes featuring animation produced by Dongwoo Studio, Michael Sinterniklas, Wayne Grayson, Sam Riegel, Greg Abbey, Darren Dunstan, Scotty Ray, Mark Thompson, Veronica Taylor, Scott Williams, David Zen Mansley, and Christopher C. Adams. The voice cast didn't just fill the roles, they armored them. The executive producers set a consistent tone of martial arts action and adventure. The show aired on Fox Box and 4Kids TV for the first 6 seasons, then switched to the CW for its last run under CW 4Kids. This network move reflects the show's enduring popularity through its run. Alternate titles weren't just branding, they tracked structural overhauls. Season 5 was Ninja Tribunal, digging deep into mythic roots. Season 6 went full sci-fi with Fast Forward, pivoting ahead in time. Season 7, Back to the Sewer, rewired the universe again for finale mode. And when it ended, its story culminated in November 2009 with Turtles Forever, a crossover film uniting the 2003 and original 1987-1996 animated Turtles. It proves the 2003 series didn't execute a soft reboot, but rebuilt continuity as a self-aware construct. Don't miss how the 2003 era treated every villain, every win, every weird science plot. The series emphasized action, storylines with serious stakes, and complex science fiction plots. While the 1990s films splashed brand everywhere, the 2003 show returned to a tone influenced by the original Mirage comics. It told stories where the Turtles faced martial arts challenges, intrigues in the city, and alien threats. Every episode feels like a late-night detective story stacked with adventure, and the franchise never looked more disciplined. 2012 animated series era. Suddenly, you couldn't escape the Turtles if you tried. Instead of airing on some cable graveyard or just popping up for the loyalists, Nickelodeon's 2012 CGI series exploded onto primetime and planted mutant ninjas smack in the middle of a whole new generation's after-school routine. Across 5 seasons and 126 episodes, this version didn't slow down or play it safe. It launched on September 28, 2012, and ran straight through November 12, 2017, rarely missing a beat. Nickelodeon Animation pumped resources into the series, with Ciro Nieli, Joshua Sternin, and Jennifer Ventimiglia steering the ship, and you could feel the difference. This wasn't a legacy cartoon dusted off for nostalgia points. It was a full-scale reboot, rendered entirely in CGI, and determined to wrestle the franchise into the modern era. First, it split the most sacred duty, leadership, between two actors, Jason Biggs for Leonardo's voice early on, with Seth Green taking up the sword for the back half. If that sounds chaotic, consider that they stacked the rest of the cast with precision. Rob Paulson, Sean Astin, Greg Sipes, Hoon Lee, Mae Whitman, and the unmistakable Clancy Brown. Sebastian Evans II, plus Stan Martinez on the theme, headlined the music, giving the whole thing a bounce that stuck. The opening theme for 4 seasons didn't just nod to the past, it sampled directly the iconic chorus from their 1987 ancestors. That's not a cameo, that's the franchise staring its own reflection down. Production wasn't some half-hearted exercise either. The Nickelodeon studio put their CGI ambitions front and center with a fresh design language that never tried to blend in with its 2E predecessors. The show's DNA reached back to Eastman and Laird, but its presentation was all velocity and slapstick and kinetic weirdness, accessible if you were new, rewarding if you had any memory of a turtle in a mask. And when it came to the network, the odds didn't get stacked against it. The show started on Nickelodeon proper, and by the time it transitioned to Nicktoons for Season 5, most kids knew the theme by heart. You might argue this was just another reboot, the kind networks churn out whenever the brand's in trouble. But that skips the sheer visibility it brought. These weren't niche heroes anymore. Suddenly Donatello's staff and Mikey's nunchucks felt familiar to millions simply by repetition, and you couldn't claim to be a Saturday morning cartoon kid and not have an opinion on which turtle was the best. It comes down to this. The 2012 Nickelodeon series made the Turtles impossible to ignore, and that's a standard every successor had to match or get left behind. Rise of the TMNT era. If you thought reboot rules mattered, think again. After years of careful continuity stitching, Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crashed onto the scene in 2018 to show they'd never really mattered at all. Not when you could reinvent everything, down to the last mask, shell, and ninja weapon. Ant Ward and Andy Suriano wrote the rules this time. Not update, rewrite. The series swapped CGI for high-voltage 2D animation, with Nickelodeon Animation Studio handling the core and Flying Bark productions pouring jet fuel into the visuals. This wasn't just a new look, every detail screamed transformation. The Turtles themselves now towered over their own past. New weapons replaced the old reliables, and Mutant Ninja meant literal magic, mystical powers, glowing energy, whole new secrets under New York streets. Suddenly, the only thing sacred was the willingness to burn down the blueprint. The shifts weren't just on the surface. The show aired its first season on Nickelodeon from July 20th, 2018 to July 6th, 2019, then shifted to Nicktoons for a condensed 13-episode second season that finished August 7th, 2020. Across 2 seasons and 39 episodes, 70 segments, the format kept mutating, and the experiment culminated in a full-length Netflix movie on August 5th, 2022. The voice cast was just as fresh. Omar Benson Miller, Ben Schwartz, Brandon Michael Smith, Josh Brenner, Kat Graham, Eric Bausa. No recasting nostalgia, just raw, present-tense personality. Even April O'Neil got a reboot. Their origin story twisted again. The Turtles discovered a father who wasn't a distant mystic, but Splinter as Lou Jitsu, martial arts maverick and fallen movie star. Their greatest enemy, Baron Draxum, wasn't some familiar shadow out of rerun land. He was invented specifically for this dimension. Why rebuild the entire foundation for just 39 episodes? Because the franchise was betting big on the next generation, caring less about legacy and more about speed, irreverence, and high-stakes weirdness. By pushing every element outside the lines, Reese's gambled that the only way TMNT survives another decade is if the stakes are not just who wins the fight, but whether anyone cares which turtle you were 10 years ago. Sure, you could argue that Rice's visuals and story pivots gave it license to shed longtime fans who wanted their continuity mapped and storied out. And yes, there is But there's truth in that. Never has a TMNT era cared less about reconciling the old with the new. But reinvention was the whole point, and for new fans, it was an open invitation, not a locked museum. Rees lives and dies by this. The further TMNT moves from its roots, the more it belongs to the ones still watching. Mutant Mayhem era. Now, they don't just redraw the Turtles, they detonate what's left of the formula. With Mutant Mayhem, the franchise didn't aim to be the next cartoon or the next continuity. It became a movie universe delivered with a day-glow aesthetic that barely resembles any Turtle timeline before. Director Jeff Rowe co-wrote and directed the film, shaping its unique visual style. Forget smooth animation. The film's animation mimics notebook sketches inspired by Rowe's own teenage drawings with jagged strokes and a sketchy, unfinished style. Mutant Mayhem hit theaters in 2023, with Paramount Pictures distributing and Nickelodeon Movies producing. No recaps, no loyalty tests, and no assignment to some dusty old canon zone. This film brings a fresh take to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, with teenage actors voicing the Turtles for the first time in the franchise. It's a superhero comedy with an energetic tone and humor aimed at both kids and adults. It's a hard stop on the past. The thing called TMNT isn't a torch passed from series to series anymore. It's a category, split off into its own weird orbit. Mutant Mayhem proves the only rule left in TMNT is that whatever carries the name must be unrepeatable.